One of the ways in which we can show numbers in our base 10 system visually, and that we'll use a lot in MAE 201, is by using a set of base 10 blocks. So these are shown, and we have these available in the cabinets. You can also have a printed version. The printed version would not include the block, but it would include the others. So the block consists of units, or another probably more common name for the unit is just to call this a cube. And you can use either of those names and that's fine, but you should not be using other names. So make sure you either call it a unit or a cube. You can't just make up whatever names you want for these different pieces. So the unit or the cube represents 1, and basically what's in the ones place represents that number. If you put 10 of those together, you get a long, or a more common name for that is to call that a rod. So we have 1 rod, and that would also represent the number in the tens place. If we put 10 of those together, we would get a flat, and you can see that there's 100 of the units or cubes inside of a flat. And then if we put 10 of those together, we would get a block. And so the block represents 1,000, which means that would be whatever digit goes in the thousands place on our number. Now, the base 10 blocks are really nice visuals for understanding a base 10 system, and this idea that once I get 10 of these, I'm going to regroup it as a rod. Once I get 10 rods, I'm going to regroup it as a flat. Once I get 10 flats, I'm going to regroup it as a big cube or a block. So it's really nice for that, but it can't be done with anything more than 4-digit numbers, really, because we've got like our ones place, our tens place, our hundreds place, our thousands place. You can't really get any bigger than that per se. So that's as far as we're going to go with this. So we're going to do an example of what we call a fair exchange, which is basically just taking like a number of these flats, longs, and units and exchanging them for the fewest possible. So we're going to fair exchange 11 flats, 17 longs, and 16 units to obtain the fewest blocks possible. Now, it can be done, I don't want you to do it, but it can be done to start with like your flats or your longs and then convert and then work your way down to units. What I expect you to do and want you to do is I want you to start with your units in much the same way that we typically start with the rightmost place value and work our way left. Like if we're doing an addition problem with the standard algorithm, we would add the numbers in our ones place first and then move on to the tens and then to the hundreds and so on. So we're going to do this the same way. So you will get the same answer, but you're kind of going the long way. It's kind of like if you wanted to travel from Kentucky down to Florida, but you did so by driving through Kansas. You're going to get to Florida, but it is not the most direct approach. So I want you to do the most direct approach because that's the way you would demonstrate for a student. You would not show them the long way around. So what I would do is I would always start with my smallest one, which is my units or my cubes. I have 16 cubes. And so basically, anytime we have 10 of these, we can regroup those as a rod. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to say, well, if I have 16, I can take 10 of those units and I can regroup that as a rod or a long. So this ends up being 1 long. And then how many units would I have left? Well, if I took 10 of those units and put them together to make a long, then I would be left with 6 units that don't make a long. So this becomes 1 long and 6 units. So each time that you do an exchange like this or you regroup, you're going to list your new total, right? And this is the process I want you to go through. And you might also draw along with this process. That's something that we typically do. So you might actually like draw your 16 units. And then you can like circle 10 of them and say, hey, these 10 get regrouped as a long. When you are drawing base 10 blocks, a lot of times instead of actually drawing the little cubes, we actually just draw them as dots just because it's faster. So that's a perfectly acceptable way to do this when you're drawing. So let's see, here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And I'm regrouping every 10 of those can become a rod. And again, you can, so I'm gonna just like kind of box those in and draw an arrow and say, I'm gonna regroup those as a rod. You can draw your rod like with the 10 cubes, but again, when we're drawing them, just because it's a lot faster, instead of drawing it as these 10 cubes stacked up, what we'll typically do is we'll just draw a line. And that's just a faster, acceptable way to draw that. So that becomes a long, and then you can see here are our 16, or I'm sorry, our 6 leftover units there. So then we would list what's our new total. So we started with 11 flats, and if I were going to draw that, I would just draw them as like bigger squares, right? So we had 11 flats. There's 9, 10, 11. I had 17 longs. And then I had the 16 units. One good idea here might be to maybe color code. That can make it a little bit easier to see like what you started with versus what part of this has been regrouped. So we can say like this part became, I'm actually going to erase it here and just put it with the other. So this became a rod. And so then what's my new total? So now my new total is I still have 11 flats. But now if I count my longs or my rods, I now actually have 18 of those because of the one that got regrouped. And then how many units do I have? Well, I only have the 6 that were left. So now I have 6 units. And so then now I'm going to move over to the next place value. So since I did units, now I'm going to move to the left and do my longs. So you could go off the same drawing, you could draw this again. It's kind of whatever is needed for the situation. So I'll just go ahead and draw it again. So here's what I have left, 11 flats, 18 longs, 6 units. And now let me do some more regrouping. So do I have enough longs that I could regroup? I absolutely do. Every 10 of these rods could be put together to make another flat. So I'm just going to draw like an arrow there and add another flat here. So now if I look at this, this is basically gone because I've replaced it with that flat. And so now I have 12 flats. I only have 8 longs left over, which is not enough to regroup another 10 of them. And I have 6 units. And I'll go ahead and draw that again and do my next step. So here I have 12 flats, 8 longs, 6 units. And I have to have at least 10 of something to regroup. I've already done my units and longs. Do I have enough flats to regroup? I actually do. So I could take any 10 of these and regroup those. And so 10 of those flats would become one block. And in terms of drawing a block, what I do is I just draw a square and then I put little diagonal lines off of those 3 corners and then just connect those diagonal lines, and that's good enough. Or another way you could do that is if you draw a square and then you draw another one kind of up and to the right of it, and then you can connect those, and that's another acceptable way to draw your block. And then last thing I would do is give the new total. So now these 10 flats are gone, so now I'm left with 1 block. I have 2 leftover flats, 8 longs, and 6 units. We probably wouldn't have to, but it wouldn't hurt to go ahead and draw that again. So that's what it would look like. 1 block, 2 flats, 8 longs, 6 units. And we can also, now that we've got this down to the fewest number of pieces, we can also come up with the answer really easily. And you could have done this when we started. Like we could have figured out, oh, okay, when we started, we had 11 flats and each flat is worth 100. So that would be 11 times 100. And then each long is worth 10. So that'd be 17 times 10. and then each unit is worth 1, so 16 times 1, and then you'd have to add all that up. So you could have found the answer, but it's not as easy as this way, right? We know that the number of blocks is the number of thousands, so that just goes in the thousands place. The number of flats is the number of hundreds, so as long as these are single digit numbers, that just goes in the hundreds place. Then we have 8 tens, so that goes in the tens place, and then 6 in the ones place. So this tells us that the number that's represented here is 1,286. So that's the kind of the purpose here of getting this down to the fewest number of blocks, is you can literally just look at the numbers 1286, and that's your number. This one uses the fewest number of pieces.